Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.
I'm with Shashi Tharoor, Congress Member of Parliament from Thiruvananthapuram, the author of several books, the latest of which is The Paradoxical Prime Minister. This is your 25th of 26th book, Shashi?
18th
book. Welcome to ThePrint.
Thank you, Jyoti. Good to be with you.
My first question to you, Shashi, is about the book, about the title of the book, of course. You say that the paradoxical Prime Minister is because Narendra Modi says one thing, does another, talks about sabka saath, sabka vikas, but remains silent when so much happens. But explain to us, to our viewers, what does the title mean?
So there are multiple paradoxes, really. In fact, we were just discussing when an interviewer came, there were about, sort of off the top of my head, about 18 paradoxes I could come up with, and we wondered whether we shouldn't have a competition for viewers or readers or tweeters to come up with more, and we picked the best, because there are so many. The man's entire 4.5 years has been a collection of paradoxes.
So give us the top three.
But the central one, with which I begin the book, is one that I diagnosed in the first 6 months of his tenure. And I wrote in the introduction to my then collection of essays, India Shastra, that there is this contradiction here. You've got this man who says the most liberal things, especially during the campaign and the immediate aftermath of his victory.
Like what?
But depends, well, like sabka saath, sabka vikas, like I'll be a president, prime minister for all Indians, that everyone must be included, all of this stuff, and relies for support on some of the most illiberal elements in Indian society and politics.
Like what?
So the RSS elements, the cow vigilantes, the ghar wapasi types, the love jihadi types, the whole lot of noises that came up in those first 6 months after the victory of Narendra Modi, which seemed to have emboldened people to conduct atrocity after atrocity. Remember, within weeks of his victory, you had the completely horrific killing of this Pune techie, Mushtaq, by a bunch of guys calling themselves the Hindu Sena, whose only motive in going out armed with hockey sticks and truncheons was to look for a Muslim to kill. I mean, they literally felt emboldened by the fact that now hamari Raj hai, hum kisi Musalman ko. And this fellow came out of a mosque, he was bearded with a cap. He was actually a techie, an IT firm in Pune. They didn't even ask him anything. He's clearly a Muslim, beat him up.
And within months of that, of course, there was the incident at Dadri.
That day itself, there was silence on the Prime Minister. I was then Congress spokesman, so I publicly called on the Prime Minister. I said, please reassure the nation this is not what your victory is about. Condemn this and say to the people who think that your victory means that they are free to do this kind of thing, that they cannot, that this is the wrong message.
So why do you think he kept silent? Why do you think he was silent?
This is part of the paradox, Jyoti, and the paradox increasingly leads one to the conclusion that ultimately that indeed was the real agenda, that the empowerment of the worst retrograde elements, communal elements in our society was a real agenda, and that economic development, Gujarat Inc., sabka saath, sabka vikas was all window dressing. When you don't have sabka saath, how do you have sabka vikas?
But, and yet you would admit that at least in the first few weeks, you were sort of taken in by this Prime Minister.
So I discussed that.
You were one of the 9 people that he called upon to launch the Swachh Bharat campaign. You guys exchanged wonderful tweets about each other. What was that about?
That was about, as I said at the time, I'm not saying anything with the benefit of hindsight. I said at the time, I had 2 motives. One was that I felt I owed respect to the electorate for the choice they had made. You have to respect your own citizens, your own people. They rejected your party and they chose another person. You have to show respect for that. Secondly, I said that we have to take the man at his word, give him the benefit of the doubt, and then judge him by the yardstick he himself is setting. If he says, I will be a Prime Minister for all, then welcome that, rather than saying you're skeptical, but judge him if he doesn't live up to it. I said that at the time, I said it openly, I said it on TV, I said it in writing, I said it within my party. You're right that it was not fully understood by many.
Including yourself. So are you trying to absolve yourself maybe?
No, I think that there was a case for giving the benefit of the doubt to a newly elected Prime Minister, and unfortunately he has sadly not earned the benefit of that doubt through his conduct in the 4.5 years since.
Okay. And so it's not about 2 ambitious men, Narendra Modi and Shashi Tharoor, trying to understand each other. I mean, you talk about the respect of the electorate, and that's well taken. But you also say that you wish that there was a kind of politics that you had in the good old days, like Jawaharlal Nehru and Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who had a certain respect for each other. So you do have a respect for this man called Narendra Modi, at least in some part.
Now, I have a lot of respect for the institution of Prime Minister, and I believe anybody who gets to that position therefore deserves and commands from all Indian citizens a certain duty of respect because the office embodies the aspirations of 1.2 billion Indians, of 120 crore Indians. Having said that, ultimately one must judge prime ministers by their conduct in office. And there, Mr. Modi, as I take a great deal of pains to lay out, and why is this a 500-page book? I could have said this perhaps, as somebody would argue, in 100 pages, but I wanted to substantiate every criticism. I didn't want people to say this is just a Congress propaganda or a screed or whatever. It's actually meant to be a detailed, substantiated analysis, point by point, issue by issue, of Mr. Modi's performance. A lot of the research that has been done there will stand the test of scrutiny by the defenders of the Prime Minister.
Now, you start in your book about the man himself and, from the time when he was a young boy, the value of hard work that he learned from his father. Then he grows older and becomes... And in the RSS becomes a pracharak. But explain to us the meaning of Moditva and how that's different from Hindutva.
Right. So, my basic assumption is that Modi is of and from the RSS, but he's not purely RSS. There is this extra element. So, Moditva is Hindutva plus Modi. And that plus Modi involves undoubtedly a personality cult, and involves the building up of a larger-than-life figure who is portrayed to the nation as somebody with this 56-inch chest, though it turns out that the actual measurement is 50, but 56 sounds better.
So tell us about that story. What is this 50-inch story about?
Well, the 50-inch story is that he's been making speeches about his 56-inch chest, but when a university he was going to give the convocation address to asked him for his measurements, asked his office for his measurements so they could stitch a bangala for him, it turned out that the measurement for his chest was 50. And that little nugget, of course, promptly leaked. And so I footnoted where it comes from. It's in the book. But my argument to you would simply be it doesn't matter because...
It doesn't matter whether it's 50 or 56 inches, isn't it?
Why does he think it matters? And what's important is that for him, the advertising of a certain masculinity is part of Moditva.
But I think in Hindi, it's an idiomatic expression, 56 inch ki chhati.
Well, it's become one, certainly, after he's taken it off. But I agree with you that...
It predates Modi, to be fair to him.
So the idea that somebody needs to have a broad shoulders and a big chest is common to most languages. The 56 inch precisely was meant to be taken literally. In fact, many of his aides told media, you can look up, I've Googled, media said this is actually the correct measurement. This is because you remember it started off as a defiant speech against Mulayam Singh Yadav.
That's right.
He said, you're talking, Mr. Yadav, to run this country, you need a 56 inch ki chhati and only I have it. That was the answer that Mr. Modi gave. It was during the 2013 period.
So in your view, in these last 4.5 years, that 56 inch has shrunk, do you think?
Well, unfortunately, as far as the image of masculinity is concerned, the marketing of that continues. But in terms of actual robust actions, we have this completely hypocritical and shallow surgical strike, so-called, as the only advertisement for it, whereas in every other yardstick, whether it's on the border with China, whether it's on the border with Pakistan, whether it's in relations with neighbors, with Maldives kicking out Indian employees and cancelling Indian contracts, Nepal opening up its northern border to the Chinese and all of that, in every respect, the tough, robust leadership that this masculine Prime Minister had promised to give has not been given.
But very sartorially elegant. I mean,
so I say there's nothing wrong.
When at the Azad Hind Fauj celebrations a few days ago, his cap was perfect, if you noticed. It was sort of at the right angle, it was beautifully tailored, and he likes that. He likes that, and apparently he's liked it even from his young days when he was much poorer. He in other words, had less access to top quality resources. He still was very immaculate about being clean, freshly ironed and pressed clothes, and so on and so forth. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. That's a good thing.
I think that's a good thing. I think that as far as an individual's, shall we say, no, obsession is too strong a word, but his preference for good grooming is concerned, I think that's part of being a civilized human being, and frankly, good grooming cannot be held against someone.
Because we do pick on his Bulgari sunglasses.
I just mentioned them because they're all there. You see, there's this odd contradiction between the message of being the authentic voice of the Indian hinterland against the Latvians elite, and then actually, Movado and Bulgari and Ray-Bans and Mont Blanc are the accessories he carries, which are all far too expensive for most of the Latvians elite. And you ask yourself, wait a minute, where's the discordancy? Isn't this another paradox?
Perhaps it's an aspirational thing, right, to have a Mont Blanc pen. And this is the reform that Dr. Manmohan Singh launched 25 years ago. So
I'm all in favor of aspirations. In fact, I trace how a lot of his marketing, even before he became Prime Minister,
Right.
was about marketing him as a modern man in tune with the aspirations of India's youth and its upwardly thrusting middle class. That was very much part of the message. I mean, why was he photographed in all these, interesting sort of Western style attire, cowboy hat, carrying a single lens camera, reading the Financial Times, all of these pictures, however genuine they were, they probably weren't very genuine. They were out there to boost a certain image. This is not your khaki shorts wearing, Shakha Pracharak. This guy comes from that background, but is all of these things more. So Moditva combines a lot of these individual features that actually have nothing to do with the RSS. The RSS's economics is Swadeshi Jagran Manch. Narendra Modi's economics is pro-globalization, pro-high-tech, Silicon Valley, all of this stuff. So you can't call Moditva a pure emanation of the RSS. It is, in fact, something that has troubled some people in the RSS, according to sources. No one comes out openly and says these things, but I've cited a few sources, often second-hand, in other words, journalists citing other people they spoke to.
Right.
And there's an incredible frustration expressed by an RSS member to Vinod Jose of the Caravan, where Modi's rise has proved irresistible. The RSS has been forced to hitch itself to the Modi bandwagon. And this fellow says, a scorpion is sitting on a shivling. You cannot remove him with your hand, and you cannot hit it with a chappal. Now, this message is a very striking image, because if you equate this gentleman to that, the RSS is saying, if you try and remove him, he'll hurt you. Right? He'll sting you, you'll die. But if you try and hit him, you'll be doing violence to all the things you believe in. You can't hit a shivling with a chappal. That is the extraordinary dilemma that some of the Hindutva forces are facing with Moditva. And that's what I try and explain and analyze in the first 55, 60 pages of the book, is analyzing how Moditva is more than just Hindutva or just RSS.
That's an incredible image, the scorpion on the shivling.
Absolutely.
And this emergence of Narendra Modi, or this sort of shedding of the RSS that you describe in the book, now what does that do to the RSS and what does that do to Modi?
Well, it clearly subordinates the RSS to an individual, which is not at all the RSS's style. There is a revealing anecdote that when Modi was a young RSS Pracharak, he was upbraided by the then Sarsang Chalak Golwalkar for wearing a beard when all RSS people were meant to be clean-shaven. And Golwalkar didn't like the fact that this man had his own ideas of how he should look. So the RSS kind of trends to promote anonymity and try and actually efface individual ego, and Modi is the opposite of that. So that's again an area where you have a paradox. He is the best hope for the RSS to advance its agenda, but he's very untypical of what the RSS wants to see in a leader.
So he does promote the pro-globalization agenda, but then he's dragged down by the Hindutva agenda at home.
Well, the problem is figuring out what is real and what is not. I mean, on the globalization agenda, he hasn't done very well, and partly one can blame international factors, partly one can blame his own disastrous decisions like demonetisation, which inevitably frightened away investors and introduced an element of unpredictability into what had been a stable Indian economy.
Right.
But I would say to you that if you look at what Modi, excuse me, has actually done most for in the last 4.5 years, it has been to empower a rethinking of what India is all about. And therefore, everything else, economics, globalization, development, has taken a backseat to an agenda which has empowered those who are rewriting history, retelling stories of ancient science, discrediting pretty much everything that 20th and early 21st century India had done under non-BJP prime ministers. You've seen a completely retrograde approach that, coupled with the appointment of various people who are sympathetic to his agenda,
Which is the RSS agenda.
absolutely,
Okay.
to various institutions, has meant that the nature of India is being sought to be transformed into something it hasn't been so far.
But you would also argue then that Indians have allowed themselves to be hijacked by this man.
Look, every people gets the leadership it deserves.
Right.
I mean, one of the reasons for this very detailed analysis is that at least it seems to me, the people who read books, who think about ideas, they should be left under no illusions. Some of them did vote for Modi last time. and for BJP last time. I don't think a single week goes by without some number of individuals coming up to me saying, look, we voted for the BJP last time, we won't be making that mistake again. So I know that there is a change of heart among some of those, but there are many others who still think, I mean, especially the BJP's marketing, assiduous promotion of this there is no alternative idea, as if we're living in a presidential system, which we're not. We live in a parliamentary system. The alternative is a set of parties with principles and values that are not the same as the RSS.
But 6 months before the elections, Shashi, your party, the Congress party, hasn't been able to put together a set of alliances.
I think it's far too early to draw that conclusion. Right now, the focus is on 5 state elections. 5 state elections. State elections, the calculations are different. Look at Mayawati's performance, for example, in Madhya Pradesh in the last assembly elections and what she's asking for today. And compare it with, say, UP, where in the last Lok Sabha elections, Mayawati won 20% of the vote and didn't win a single seat. So even from Mayawati's point of view, the logic of actually seeking allies is compelling, because her support is what they would call in America a mile wide and an inch deep. It's everywhere in the state. So you get 20% everywhere, you lose every election. That's what happened to her last time. She needs, in some constituencies, to take that 20 to 40. To do that, she needs allies. So the calculations in the Lok Sabha are very different from that of the assembly elections in these 5 states.
So you sound like the Congress is looking for an alliance with Mayawati.
Look, it's above my pay grade. I'm not actually involved in those negotiations, and I don't want to imply.
But do you think it should?
But I think it's very clear that the signals to all of us in the party are that there will be some states where there are pre-poll alliances, and UP is clearly one where that would be desirable, and there'll be some states where there won't be pre-poll alliances, but where after the parliamentary seats are added up, new calculations will emerge. I mean, a classic example is my own state. There's no way the CPM and the Congress will ever be allied in a state election or even in a national election inside the state. But as we saw in 2004, the CPM routed us in 2004 in the Lok Sabha, but then supported the UPA won when it was formed because they want to keep the BJP out.
Right.
So the same sort of logic will come in for other regional parties, which in the elections may be opposed to us, but will work with us afterwards. So let's wait and see. I don't think that it's a question of one person versus another person.
So Shashi, the name of your book is very interesting, The Paradoxical Prime Minister, and it brings to mind the name of another book, The Accidental Prime Minister, which was also launched a few months before the 2014 election. So this is a marketing gimmick too.
Well, look, I actually come up with my own titles, and I'm rather proud of this one. But it was nice to have the Accidental Prime Minister release the Paradoxical Prime Minister yesterday at the Nehru Memorial, of all places, as appropriately as you can get. And I would say that
was set up as well.
That was actually a very appropriate message. I would say that if you look very objectively at the Prime Ministers we've had, these have been 2 individuals who've left a very major mark on our society. In the case of Manmohan Singh, I think what he did particularly to steward the economy for 5 years as finance minister and for 10 as prime minister will frankly outlast all these short-term judgments of the media today. And as for Narendra Modi, if we don't stop him now, he could actually transform India into something that it never has been for 70 years. And I really hope that people will wake up and see that.
So one of the things that Prime Minister Narendra Modi talks about a lot is about the family. And he is, of course, referring to Sonia Gandhi, her son Rahul, and the Nehru Gandhi family. Now, what does that do to the people when they listen to these speeches and his constant iteration about the family?
Well, I think it's kind of, frankly, petty politics. It's personalizing what ought to be about issues and ideas. I think we have to really take the high road and focus on the values, the principles, the ideologies that separate Mr. Modi's party from ours. And if he wants to take the personal route, as he did last time also, remember speaking of Shehzada, why didn't he say Rajkumar? He'd say Shehzada because he wants to tarnish Rahul Gandhi with a sort of pro-Muslim brush. This kind of logic, this kind of
So you think he does it deliberately?
Of course he does it very deliberately.
Shehzada instead of Rajkumar?
Of course.
And why do you think he does that?
Because obviously he's, as they use the American expression, it's a dog whistle to his core Hindutva bigoted base.
No, so we don't understand the term dog whistle. What does that mean?
It means it's a quiet signal to those people saying, you have any worries about whether I'm still genuinely committed to Hindutva? This is a code word. This is a clue. When Giriraj Singh says those who are critics of Modi should go to Pakistan.
Right.
If you want to send your enemies far away, suggest Canada. Why Pakistan? Again, tar them with the pro-Muslim brush. So everything that is Muslim, Pakistan, Shehzada, all of this is part of a very conscious signaling to the core bigoted base. You don't need to be explicitly bigoted. They understand what you're doing.
But you're also saying that he's sort of, he's shed the RSS. So if he's shed the RSS,
No,
then
he's
he cannot...
emerged from it, and that core bottom, as I said, Moditva is Hindutva plus Modi. It's not Hindutva minus Modi. So all of Hindutva is there, the Hindutva agenda. That's why the RSS tolerates him. Right. That's why he's
because
a scorpion
it promotes the RSS agenda.
Exactly.
So it promotes the RSS agenda.
Promotes very
they
much
don't know
the
what to
agenda.
do without him.
Exactly, but he is larger than them, larger than life, etc.
So they can't shed him either.
Described how he manages a very interesting tightrope dance. You know, he sends his cabinet regularly to Nagpur to give an account of their work to the RSS bosses, answer their questions, and essentially have their report cards ticked. Now that is a very interesting, never happened before, certainly didn't happen under Vajpayee, but it's happened under Narendra Modi. And it's happened under Narendra Modi because he wants to reassure the RSS even while leaping beyond them.
So each of his cabinet, whether it's Sushma Swaraj, Rajnath Singh, and all the others, now Nirmala Sitharaman and earlier Manohar Parrikar, each of them go to Nagpur?
Absolutely.
And
that's in the media. They don't hide it. It's very open. They go and they meet the RSS leadership and they give an accounting of their work and their ministries.
What about Amit Shah?
I'm sure he goes far more often than just that because he has obviously a much larger national agenda at stake.
So it seems today, in today's India, that Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Amit Shah, the BJP president, are perhaps the two most powerful men in the country. What does that do to India's politics?
I think it is actually quite worrying because it's not the way in which the system is supposed to work. You know, when you have a defense minister who doesn't know in advance about the surgical strike, when you have a cabinet that doesn't know in advance about demonetisation, when you have a home minister who doesn't know about certain arrests of CBI figures and so on.
But that's speculation. I'm sure they all knew. They may not.
I'm not sure they knew because there are multiple sources, according to reliable media, that told them, for example, that on demonetisation they were summoned in literally half an hour before Modi's announcement. They were kept in a locked room and they were still in the room when he made the announcement.
But they still knew. Well, some of them knew at any rate. But the centralisation of the man.
Now, it's fairly widely known that the chief economic advisor did not know, the RBI governor did not know, and apparently the finance minister did not know. But we don't know what the full story on the demonetisation. So, no, this is very much a different style of management, and certainly there are supposed to be certain processes to be followed. One of the issues the Congress has been regularly raising on the Rafale deal is, did you go through the Cabinet Committee on Security? Did you follow the existing defense procurement norms? How did Modi take an agreement to have 128 aircraft, parts manufactured in France, assembled at the HAL in Bangalore, go to Paris and unilaterally change that to 36 aircraft at 3 times the price in a flyaway condition made in France with an offset contract to...
So what is Rahul Gandhi trying to do by his courting arrest on the Rafale deal on the whole
He considers this to be
CBI
one
army?
of the worst scams in the history of independent India, possibly the single worst, because it also
But has
threatens
Rahul
our
Gandhi
security.
emerged as an alternative? I mean, that's what the people of India are looking
This is
for
what
as well.
I keep telling you, this is not a presidential system in our country.
But
Rahul Gandhi may
so
be
maybe Narendra Modi has sort of shaped it towards a presidential system, hasn't he?
But he can't. Because what happens tomorrow if the BJP, people go and vote apparently for Modi, and the BJP doesn't get enough seats, but still gets enough to be asked first to form the government, and they realize Mr. Modi isn't going to attract the allies they need to reach the majority number, so they ask somebody else in the BJP to form the government. What happened to your presidential system then?
The
point is, our parliamentary system doesn't guarantee a particular person being prime minister, even if he runs as that.
So there's no need for there to be one alternative, but there could be several.
Exactly. We have a number of parties. Look, if the Congress gets 250 seats, I'm sure Rahul Gandhi will be Prime Minister. If the Congress gets 115 seats, I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussions amongst constituents of a future UPA. We have to wait and see what the numbers are.
So last words on the paradoxical Prime Minister. You had we had an early good association with him, but you seem to have sort of rewritten yourself.
Well, I mean, I must say that the disappointment is that even those who were prepared to give him the benefit of the doubt have been let down, that there hasn't been Sabka Saath or Sabka Vikas. There hasn't been inclusive governance. There hasn't been this whole business of minimum government, maximum government. It's been the most centralized government in living memory since Indira Gandhi's Prime Minister's Secretariat.
Perhaps he's modelling himself on Indira Gandhi.
Well, whatever. It's not exactly what he campaigned on. It's not exactly what he said. And you've seen things like the overreach on Aadhaar, the haste and thoughtlessness on demonetization, the absolutely insane, botched implementation of what would have been a good measure, GST, which is now gradually fixing itself, but after chaos.
And a quick last interjection on the Arab government in West Asia, which wanted to run a port in India. You talk about that.
Well, my lawyers obliged me to censor the details of that story, but it was very clear that he had a particular point of view. about people of a certain background.
So this was the UAE?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I've left enough hints in there about what the position of the Prime Minister was, because unfortunately it was only he and me, and it'll be my word against his. I don't want to risk any libel.
No, but he was the Chief Minister.
He was Chief Minister of Gujarat at that time, and he took a very strongly negative stand. Now,
what did he say?
I must say that I can't tell you that, because unfortunately my lawyers won't let me. But I can tell you that since then he has somewhat redeemed himself on the UAE by developing a very good relationship. He didn't go there for the first year of his office, but he learned that this was an important relationship for India, and he went out there and has cultivated good relations. I granted him that in the...
But you can also argue that a foreign government cannot run something as sensitive as a port.
But it's not a government, you see. It's a company. Company happens to be bought by another company.
But even worse, a company cannot run a port in India.
The funny thing was, however, that the P&O was running 4 ports or 5 ports. And the ports, when P&O was bought by Dubai Ports World, the ports in other states all immediately signed new contracts with the new company.
They were running 4 ports in India?
Yeah. There are many, many ports that are managed by on tender basis.
So Mr. Modi, as Chief Minister of Gujarat, did not want this particular port to be run
by Dubai Ports World.
Because you're saying that it was...
I can't say, but I mean, he was very blunt, shall we say, in the choice of words that he used to express why...
No, so I'm saying that he didn't allow this Dubai company to run the port in Gujarat because it was run by a Muslim...
I can't confirm or deny, Jyoti, because there are things, unfortunately, that will needlessly create, shall we say, sort of legally actionable issues, which we don't want to. We don't want to do. The arguments made about Mr. Modi will stand without necessarily every single anecdote there about him. I've quoted him faithfully on those occasions where he has said things to me that he would not at all be embarrassed to be quoted about, because these are things he believes, and it's very clear that I haven't quoted every conversation, obviously, because many of these were genuinely casual conversations at a Rashtrapati Bhavan dinner or that kind of thing. But they gave me a good insight into the man, and it's not all negative, far from it.
Right.
I was very impressed to hear him say, for example, that he gives away his salary to charity, which is something he says he's been doing since he was Chief Minister, and not just now. So I have no reason to disbelieve him, and if he does that too he does it without any publicity, I felt let him deserve the publicity. Let us see all sides of the man.
But I hear a but in that sentence.
The but is that you can be a good human being at one level and be a terrible human being for the vast majority of your countrymen at another level.
Mr. Shashi Tharoor, thank you so much for speaking to The Print.
Thank you, Jyoti.
Please continue to watch our channel on YouTube, The Print. This is Jyoti Malhotra.